the most exciting and attention-grabbing stories that I've come across is the true account of the Tsavo lion man-eaters, now a story over a century old. The film that brought it to the mainstream was The Ghost and the Darkness, written by, inarguably, one of the greatest screenwriters in cinematic history, William Goldman. Someone who amassed such a respectable and eclectic fold of films that he stands as an outlier for being a Renaissance man of screenwriting.
Inconceivable!
The reason the film even came to existence was because of the way the story hooked into Goldman's consciousness. He first heard the story of the lions in the 1980s and developed his own script sporadically all the way into the 90s. This is how you know when an artist is true and passionate, that when without initiation by anyone else but their own, they take the time to cultivate the project until it's ready. To me, this is more than just a monster flick, which many round it down to. It made an impression on me that still lingers ever since I first saw it when it came out on home video. The mystery of why these lions did this brought upon a significance to the story that was greater than any other monster movie. In Jaws, we know and are explained to as to why the shark is killing. It's simply a feeding instinct without deliberate intention.
What we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine.
But The Ghost and the Darkness touches upon supernatural implications, theorizing that the only way these lions could have killed over 100 men and evade being hunted down by Patterson is that they were possessed by evil spirits. And there is precedent to this theory that brings upon grander proportions. In the Bible's New Testament, beginning in Matthew 8:28, Christ encountered 2 men possessed by demonic spirits, where he then cast them out into a herd of swine, depicted here in Breton Riviere's painting, which was eerily created just a few years before the events in Tsavo. But to consider The Ghost in the Darkness as only inspired by Jaws is to ignore what other film it parallels, The Exorcist. Both stories contain the trait of a man who is out of his league at first, who then joins forces with an experienced elder to overcome the pervading evil. The Ghost in the Darkness is strengthened for having intentional antagonists instead of mindless killing machines. When the filmmakers were gearing up for the production, an enormous contention arose almost last minute prior to the cameras rolling. The producer, Michael Douglas, decided that he should play the mysterious hunter Remington, originally called Redbeard preceding Douglas's casting. This role was originally meant for the likes of Sean Connery, Morgan Freeman, Paul Newman, or Anthony Hopkins. They were either unavailable or turned it down.
Oh my God.
Once Douglas decided he was going to be in the movie, he wanted to flesh out the character more from how it played on the page, whereas Goldman wanted a mythic and mysterious character that would make you realize how dire the circumstances have become once Remington dies by the jaws of the lions. Instead, Douglas wanted the audience to feel sad when Remington's body is discovered, but Goldman knew that if he didn't change the script, Douglas would just hire another writer anyway to do it for him. So Goldman proceeded with, as he called it, destroying the character. And he was right. Every scene, mainly the campfire moments, feel out of place when Remington's backstory tries to force its way into the narrative.
My life was shaped because someone invented gunpowder. That's what took me around the world. It's a memory that I wanted. That was the family that I lost.
One way to find balance of keeping Remington a mysterious figure but also allow a degree of backstory is to simply suggest it. To have Patterson one night at the campfire ask Samuel what happened to him and where he'd come from. Samuel would hold back, telling him that it's not his place to say so. Then later on in the 3rd act, have Patterson finally ask him directly, "What happened to you?" And then Remington would say, "Maybe that's a story for tomorrow." But there is no tomorrow for him. That very night, he's killed by the lions. That's how sympathy can be generated for Remington. Not because you find out he lost his family during the Civil War, but because there's a sliver of promise that he might develop the bond between he and Patterson. But all of that is ripped away by the lions. That is drama. That is how Remington's death could have gotten more audience members to lament, while also keeping the mystique of the character intact. It's unfortunate Douglas decided to go a different direction, when the filmmakers could have found a middle ground between the either-or mentality. Val Kilmer has gotten much flack for his performance in the film, having been shockingly nominated for a Razzie Award near after the film's release. And granted, he begins his performance with a moderate Irish accent.
And it worked.
point of fact, it didn't.
That gradually disappears as the film progresses. Other than that, this is a performance that is in the top tier with the rest of his iconic roles. Admittedly, this is not a loud or showy character. Doc Holliday, Jim Morrison, and Gay Perry hold that prestige. John Patterson is in the pantheon of his performances like the one in Heat and Spartan. Growing up watching Kilmer put forth a tremendous cinematic illustration that informed my perspective of masculinity, bravery, and resilience in the face of very real and fearful circumstances. Another praise to put forth. I've rediscovered just how masterful Jerry Goldsmith was, having composed films such as The Mummy, Air Force One, and Rudy, among many others. He creates a soundtrack that has glorious shouts of adventure, poundings of epic heroism, and subtle lurking evil. It's now become a looping addition to my daily musical playlist, and if anything has staying power like that, it is certainly a sign that greatness exists inside of it. A huge technical issue I have found is how imperfect the transfer is. It is without differing of opinions that this film requires a restoration. The transfer contains scratches, flashing imperfections, and strange darkenings in the peripheries of countless shots. I believe this story is valid for a remake, or a miniseries. For one reason, the lines themselves are not historically accurate, which I find, aside from the Remington rewrites, to be the weakest aspect in the film. Male Savo lines are maneless, which likely enabled them to sneak through the camp much easier than a traditional male. When a retelling is put into play, giving a nod to this film in order to visually differentiate the lions, my instinct is to actually have one with a lighter fur and the other with a darker coat. Goldman once mentioned how he didn't think the film was well received as it could have been because The Lion King had recently come out, and audiences didn't want a complete tarnishing of their beloved animated characters. This certainly may have been a factor, but I don't believe it was the only one. When a film fails, I think there are multiple reasons, and some that aren't even realized at first. But time tells when a film holds true to its worth. The Ghost in the Darkness still shows its strength, with its cinematography of Africa, which hauntingly uses tall grass to invoke a trepidation in the spirit of how Jaws used water. The magnificent score by Goldsmith, Kilmer's leading man presence, John Conne's underutilized but still pivotal role of Samuel, making him the film's voice, a smart choice by Goldman, since he is a native of where the events take place. And finally, Goldman's passionate and adventure-centric writing, with a few dashes of horror, because boy, this film brought nightmares to my 7-year-old self, fearing numerous nights that the clasp of lion's teeth would sink into my feet and ankles, pulling me from my bed. Maybe I should have been older when I first saw the film. Nah. The Ghost in the Darkness still stands as one of the films I saw growing up that captivated my senses, my fears, and inspired my creative and adventurous spirit that still continues to this very day, where it'll remain a classic in my household.